Treasury never did that in your day, Rod, did they? And I find it incredibly difficult to think that I would have described the Senate as a God-forsaken place 15 years ago. But it's fantastic to be here with the IPA. Rod, your leadership, John's leadership really is hugely important for the policy debate. And to my good friend Josh, thank you for the very generous welcome. To Tony Staley, someone I've long admired, made an enormous contribution to Australia. It's great to see you, Tony, as well. And thank you everyone for coming along, because this is, of course, the world's oldest free market think tank. World's oldest free market think tank. And I see Stuart MacArthur over there, my old friend. You weren't around at the origination, but Stuart is someone who has, like the IPA, kept our feet to the fire in prosecuting the benefits of free markets. And there's no doubt that your commitment to preserving and strengthening society's social and economic framework has been an important part of Australia's last 40 years of significant economic progress. Underpinned by a series of major economic reforms, Australia is in the midst of one of the largest economic expansions in our history. In fact, we're in our 24th consecutive year of economic growth, and we're almost equal to the record 26-year achievement of the Netherlands. So thank God we haven't had a recession for 24 years. We're certainly on track to have the longest period of continuous economic growth of any modern country. Australia's economic success has greatly enhanced our quality of life, and the government is determined to ensure this continues well into the future. To do so, we need to be able to prepare and plan for the challenges we face. And as that video just showed you earlier this month, I released an intergenerational report. It sets out the difficult choices that we need to make as a nation if we are to continue to improve our standard of living over the longer term. I want to say at the outset that I am optimistic about Australia's future, and I believe that the very best years of our nation are ahead of us. So let's, for a moment, imagine what that future looks like. The intergenerational report shows if we get our policy settings right, Australia's economy will continue to strengthen over the next 40 years. So what does that look like? Well, by 2055, we will live longer, we will be living healthier lives, and we'll be richer. More Australians will be supported in retirement through the superannuation system. And bear in mind, when compulsory superannuation was introduced in 1992, life expectancy was 72. Today, life expectancy is 82. And in 40 years' time, life expectancy will be 100. So superannuation obviously has an important role to play, but particularly people saving for their own retirement. We've got to make sure that when people earn money and save money for retirement, that there's enough there and that they're in control of their destiny. By 2055, more Australians will be realising the dream of owning their own home. Well, I certainly hope so. And with the right preparation, we as a nation will be living within our means, allowing us to continue to fund the social services the Australian community expects. By 2055, our economy will have made, because it must, the necessary adjustment from the mining boom. Small businesses will be leading our engagement with Asia, facilitated by numerous free trade agreements that we've signed in recent days and will over the months and years ahead. We will have had many decades of benefit from greater and sustained engagement with the Asian region. In fact, with over 1.5 billion people moving into the middle class in the Asian region, by 2030, Australia would have reversed the tyranny of distance that has plagued us for all our history. By the middle of the 21st century, and it's not long away, the continuing growth of economies in Asia will have changed the global economy. At the same time, our lives will be very different as a result of technological changes that have continued to alter the traditional ways of doing business. We'll be capitalising on our reputation as innovators and entrepreneurs. We'll be using our education and skills to engage with our regional trading partners. We'll have businesses operating in India We'll have consultancies operating extensively in China, financial advisors, for example, in Vietnam, and there will be Australian companies set up in Indonesia and right across the region that are very actively engaged at a local level. And this will be happening on a scale that we've never seen before. In 2055, in fact, well before then, there'll be a surveyor in Melbourne working, probably from home, on a highway project in central China without ever visiting it. There'll be an Australian financial planner advising their clients in Mumbai on their personal investment portfolio. And unlike now, when services represent only 20% of our exports, despite being 70% of our economy, by the middle of the century, services may well end up being our major export. So we will achieve this by using the skills and knowledge of all Australians better. We'll be able to enter and re-enter the workforce without discrimination, no matter how old we are or how young we are, and hopefully there will be no impediments. In particular, if Australia's female participation rates could be increased to match those of other countries, then we could generate significant growth for our economy. For example, today, if we could match Canada's female workforce participation rate, which is around 4% higher than Australia, our economy would be permanently $25 billion larger. That's like adding in another region the economic size of Greater Geelong to our economy each year. And we will have taken a new approach to education and training and a new approach to how we manage the phases of our careers, particularly when we're not in the workforce. I suspect in a few years' time we'll look back in disbelief at the earlier time when people studied when they were young, worked through their middle years and then retired. I sense those days are going to change, if they're not already. So how do we build a 21st century economy? How ready are we now? Well, a modern tax system has a key role to play. That's why yesterday here in Melbourne I started the conversation about how we as a nation can start to build a tax system for the future. For too long, our tax system has been reactive rather than proactive. Band-aid after band-aid has been applied to fix past problems as opposed to planning for the future. That's why our tax laws now number several thousand pages. Our tax paper process is helping to plan for the future and simplify the taxation system. But in order to have a rational discussion, everyone must be in possession of the facts. We have to learn from other countries, but also make decisions that best suit our circumstances. Our current tax system was designed in the 1950s. It was back in a time when government-owned utilities dominated the marketplace, when we had high tariffs, and particularly had very little global trade. Our tax system, in large part, has not kept up with the change in the global economy, and it's now completely out of step with the rest of the world. On average, of all tax collected across the OECD, around 34% comes from personal and company taxes. In Australia, it's 70%. 70%. Just 12 companies in Australia pay 1/3 of all company tax. 12 companies pay 1/3 of company tax. That means changes in company structures or a sudden change in the business environment can lead to dramatic changes in the revenue we receive from company tax. On an individual basis, 2% of taxpayers pay a quarter of all personal income tax. 2%. It's our biggest tax, $170 billion a year, and a quarter of it comes from 2% of taxpayers. So this needs to be taken into consideration when discussing the tax system. Not about whether it's fair or unfair, but the risks to our revenue and the risks now associated with the mobility of individuals and companies and the fact that they can move at any time and still meet market expectations. But ultimately, it's also important because the taxes we collect and the stability of our revenue base determine the sorts of services we can provide. We need a tax system that is fit for purpose and one that is relevant to our future. What we know is that consumer behaviour and globalisation are changing our economy, and they're doing it fast. As a start, new technologies are empowering consumers and breaking down the traditional economic structures. Disruptive technologies are eroding the powers of government, something the IPA should be celebrating. Never before in our history have our markets been so fragmented and so free. Governments will never again be as influential in our lives as they once were. Businesses like Airbnb and Uber started up in spite of government regulation, not because of government regulation. Airbnb has become the world's largest hotel chain without owning one hotel room. Uber has become the world's largest taxi company without owning a single taxi. And ASOS, something you probably haven't heard of, most of you. It's a UK fashion website. It's become one of the world's largest fashion retailers without a single change room. Get this, 4 cargo planes of ASOS packages arrive in Australia each and every week. 4 cargo planes, 747s a week, come with clothes bought sight unseen and simply returned to Australian drop-off location if the exchange is required. Users can pay a flat yearly fee for unlimited 3-day express shipping from the United Kingdom. For orders less than $1,000, potentially neither ASOS nor the consumers pay GST. 4 cargo planes a week, no GST. I'm not sure about the applause. I want you to know these are the disruptive forces that we have to face up to. And this is the beauty of consumer sovereignty in one sense. It's challenging how we govern, and it's challenging how we regulate, and it's challenging how we collect tax. In 2015, Intergenerational Report warns that the pressure on taxes and spending will increase, not decrease, over the next 40 years. You say to yourself, why 40 years? And I went to a childcare centre the other day, and every child I saw in that childcare centre in 40 years' time will be younger than I am today. And I look around the childcare centre, that's why we're doing this. For them, as much as for ourselves, but even more so for them and those that follow. And so if left unchecked, the public spending we inherited in government would have grown by an average of 3.6% per year. This is above inflation, meaning that in 40 years' time, federal government expenditure would represent 37% of our economy. 37% of our economy. The highest ever level of tax collected in Australia in the 1980s was around 25% of our economy. Yet federal government expenditure would be 37% of the economy in 40 years' time if we hadn't have done what we did in the last budget. The budget deficit would have been projected to deteriorate to around 12% of GDP, around 3 times the worst budget deficit ever recorded by Labor, around $150 billion a year. And under the budget settings left behind by our predecessors, net debt would be larger than the Australian economy. It would be $5.6 trillion in today's dollars, and on an international level, this would put us just behind Greece and Japan. Difference being that unlike Japan, we wouldn't have the domestic savings to pay for it. After the action we have currently taken and legislated, net debt is halved over the next 40 years to $2.6 trillion in today's dollars. Again, way too high, unacceptable, but halved in 1 year. But it doesn't go far enough. If all our policies from the last budget were implemented, we would see Australia return to living within our means in 2032. That means you get rid of the net debt and you're actually a net lender. 2032. You know, that's where we were just 6 years ago. 6 years ago. To get back to where we were, or when there was a change of government to Labor, everything we've done, if it were all implemented, would get us back there in 2032. Why does it matter? It matters because every single dollar of additional debt is money that will be left for someone else to pay off. And leaving the next generation to pick up the tab for spending today, that's unfair. That's unfair. At the moment, we, the federal government, are borrowing $100 million each and every day just to pay our daily bills. $100 million a day. Think of the scale. $100 million a day could buy you 40 kilometres of new road every day. $100 million a day could buy you 2 brand new high schools every day. In a week, you'd have a major new teaching hospital. And as it stands, just to pay our daily bills, we're borrowing that much every day. So I'm not proud of that. I'm certainly not. And I'm not going to leave it to my children or others to have to pay the bills. So to maximise the opportunities for tomorrow, we have to live within our means today. Improving our budget position would afford scope for future governments to further adjust policy to provide tax relief or make productivity enhancing investments. This in turn would boost economic growth, in turn help to create more jobs. The tax system should serve a dual purpose of collecting revenue and facilitating economic growth. And this is not a simplistic trade-off of tax cuts or tax increases. It does require a carefully structured approach. And as I've said on many occasions, no country on earth has taxed its way to prosperity. But we can't look at taxation in isolation from expenditure in our economy. The next component of our economic strategy will come with the 2015 budget. It will be a responsible budget, it will be a measured budget, and it will be a fair budget. And the focus will be to build a stronger Australian economy through boosting small business, reforming childcare to encourage greater workforce participation, improving productivity by investing in infrastructure, expanding export markets through free trade agreements, and building greater confidence and integrity in our tax and welfare systems. We'll also continue to improve the budget bottom line each and every year. We must continue a sustainable and sensible path of budget consolidation. We must live within our means. In addition, monetary policy as guided by the Reserve Bank and fiscal policy as reflected in our budget must work hand in hand. All new spending will be offset by savings that are responsible and fair. And importantly, the government will continue to invest in the drivers of economic growth. The 2015 budget will create jobs, growth and opportunity so that we can relieve the burden on everyday Australians. And it will enable us to unlock the incredible potential of our future. So, ladies and gentlemen, good economic management will balance our expenditure and revenue needs to ensure continued growth and also an improvement to our high standard of living. You know, governing may be tough in these times, but you can never give up on preparing for the future. There is no finishing line on reform, and certainly not today, because the status quo, it's not a policy option for the future. In fact, if you want to maintain the status quo these days, you have to change. Australia has seen life expectancy rise. We've seen our incomes rise. We've seen our quality of life improve. And that's come about through hard work, not just because we're the lucky country. And we've come to expect that it will just happen. Well, it won't. Well, it won't. We have to earn our future. We have to prepare for our future. And the government is determined to work with you to make our future even better than it is today. Thank you very much.